for the few people in attendance and the dozens who are listening all around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, from his spare bedroom in Norfolk, England, Mark Laws asks you to get ready to fight Bucket Monday!
Just before the red light comes on, there we go, recording has started. Robyn, welcome to the TFIM show.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Good, I'm sure you are. And all the way from sunny Glasgow, or your outskirts?
No, I live in Fife, Mark.
Oh, you're Fife. Oh, sorry, outskirts of Edinburgh, I meant.
Yeah, well, I'm from Glasgow, but yeah, I've not lived in Glasgow for 10 years. But yeah, sunny Fife.
Okay, this is where I get confused. You came and did a course with me in Glasgow.
I always forget that's how we met, by the way. That's really funny. Yeah, we did. What was that? Bodyweight course.
Something like that, yeah. So
yeah,
the course was in
that
Glasgow.
was in Glasgow, yeah.
And Fife is on the outskirts of Edinburgh, near enough,
Yeah,
isn't it?
indeed.
Forgive my Scottish ignorance. Isn't it not far
No.
from Edinburgh?
Yeah, literally 20, 30 minutes away. So yeah, you're not far off.
I'm not far
I tell
off.
people like I'm literally near Edinburgh anyway, because nobody literally knows where Fife is, so it's fine.
Oh, fair enough. I got Scotland right, so that's kudos to me. Robyn, I'll start off. I've got a quick fire round. I'm going to ask you 8 questions, and you don't know what they are. I want you to imagine that if you know the end is coming, whether that's the world being obliterated or whether it's just that you were lucky enough to know that it was your last day on the planet. I'm going to give you 8 categories. I want to know what would be the last thing you would want to experience in each one.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah.
I haven't found a quick and easy way of explaining that yet. I'll work on that. But
No, I
basically,
think that was quite good, to be honest.
I could have said, I'm going to ask you for your favourite things, but that would have been too easy.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So what would be your last meal?
Chicken curry.
Nice. And what are you having with it?
Well, it's got to be mini spring rolls and egg fried rice, obviously, or a full Chinese buffet.
Oh, nice. And what would be your last drink?
Iron brew.
Not in the slightest bit stereotypical. What would be the last movie you'd watch? And don't say Braveheart or Trainspotting.
I'm not going to keep going down the Scottish route. Okay, please don't laugh, but like the Eurovision movie.
There's a Eurovision movie?
Yes, on Netflix. See, if you're having a sad day, please go watch it. I've watched it about 5 times. Love, honestly, the best movie ever. It's got Will Ferrell in it. So good.
In what way will it cheer me up?
It's just so bad, but it's really
Okay.
funny. And Will Ferrell's really funny. So
Okay, Eurovision the movie. What would be the last band or musician you would listen to?
I've got such a wide range of music taste. Okay, I'm gonna go for My Chemical Romance.
Chemical Romance. Okay, not bad. I've heard of them at least, which is more than can be said for most of the times I've asked that question.
That's good.
What would be the last book you would read?
Okay, I'm terrible at reading books because I can hardly read them, but that's because I've got a short attention span, not because I can't read. But something personal develop. No, well, you're going to die, so why would you want to develop anything personal? The last book I read was called, what was it? Discipline is Destiny by Ryan Holiday, and it's all about stoicism. So I really loved that book. So, but yeah, maybe not applicable if it's your last day on the planet.
Yeah, why not? Make it a good day.
It could do.
What would be the last town or city you'd want to visit?
Oh, Oban, definitely Oban.
Where's that?
In Scotland, like up north. It's about 4 hours, 3 hours up, kind of. I'm like, never eat shitty wheat. Northwest. So yeah, it's a beautiful little town.
Cool. What would be the last hobby that you would do?
Hobby. Maybe ice skating.
Nice. And who would be the last iconic person that you would want to hear from or be exposed to?
My favourite comedian, Joanne McNally.
Joanne McNally. I've not heard of her either. What is wrong with me?
She does a podcast called My Therapist Ghosted Me, and not that I'm like shouting about someone else's podcast on a podcast, but it's really funny.
You shout about any other podcast.
Okay, I'll shout about my own, just joking. She is so funny, and she would say something really, really rude that would be quite good to hear on your last day on the planet.
Okay, cool. Perfect. Well, happy days. Now everybody knows a little bit more about Robyn Drummond. For me to fill in the gaps between, we touched on it earlier. So the reason you are an interesting person to me is because you came on to a course that I taught that we've established was in Glasgow. It was probably 7 or 8 years ago. You were relatively you weren't actually that new into the fitness industry, because I think you'd been working in a leisure centre, teaching some classes, but it would be fair to say you kind of kept yourself within some very sort of strict boundaries as to what you did within your role. You had like a comfortable circle that you were in, and we've chatted in the past when I did the PT podcast with you that you almost worried about doing personal training because you didn't feel that you were good enough. Would that be a fair summary?
Yeah, definitely. I think when we met during that course, I remember the one thing that I actually remember from doing it is I didn't even have confidence to do a box jump. Like, I was too scared to do it, but it wasn't because I was scared of falling. I was scared to look silly. And I remember that so vividly from the course that we did. And then I think moving into even like recalling back on doing my assessments, or, you know, having another instructor like ask me to show them something or whatever it may be, I think that I really, really did like lack confidence, and I would never ever have sat like and thought, okay, in years to come you're going to be like an online PT, or you're going to have your own business, you're going to do all this stuff. Like, absolutely not. So I think I very much, had I not been presented with the opportunity, I would never have probably gone and found it, because I definitely, you know, lacked that confidence. And I just stayed within, you know, that little bubble of just doing what I knew, and I loved it, of course. So yeah, definitely fair to say.
Yeah, and then COVID came along, lockdown kicked in, and again, I'm sort of paraphrasing here, you almost begrudgingly, because you couldn't then teach your classes in the leisure centre with the hardcore crew of 10, 12, 15 people, whatever it was that came religiously to all of your classes, you sort of begrudgingly did an online version of those classes to help those people, which was you going way out of your comfort zone to put yourself in an online forum where you're charging people to come and do your classes. And then within months that took off exponentially, and to the point where you were up to 1,100, 1,200, 1,300 people that were paying a monthly subscription to come and be part of your little community that you that you built up. So like that fascinates me, because of the journey from putting up your own barriers, the kind of self-inflicted barriers that held you back, to then having everything ripped away and being left with no choice whatsoever but to break down your own barriers, and then realizing, fuck me, I'm really good at this, and now and now over 1,000 people want to give me a tenner a month because they enjoy and they need what I have to offer them so much.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely crazy. But even the pivotal moment that I was presented with at the start of the pandemic, like even that moment was not a, oh right, okay, I'm just going to go do it. I remember my employer at the time, because I was working self-employed doing fitness classes, and that's then, you know, the members that then came on board in that initial group. But I remember that employer saying to me, like, Robyn, can you do like live classes for us? And I was like, no, I still have the email that says like I'm really struggling with my anxiety, like I'm so anxious, like I can't do it, it's not my thing, like I'll never do it, that type of thing. And then it was I think we were just chatting amongst like that little group on WhatsApp with the ladies that came, you know, to the leisure centre, and I was like, do you want me to do like a Zoom quiz, like something like this? And everyone's like, yeah, that sounds great. And then it wasn't until my best friend was like, Robyn, like, can you please just go and do this thing? Like, go and just start a Facebook group and have people in it. And I was like, fine, okay then, I'll go and start it. And again, this was purely because I would never have woke up one day thinking like, oh, I'm a really good PT and I'm a really good instructor, so therefore I'm going to do this, start a business and make lots of money. Like, that thought process never occurred at any point. I mean, it still doesn't really, you know, but yeah, she really, really threw me into that. And before she even knew it, she was then working for me, and the two of us were just absolutely like, you know, turning over this Facebook group that was just like hundreds of people were coming in so fast. And yeah, it's absolutely crazy, so crazy. I honestly, like, I think, you know, being the person that was too terrified to jump on like a box to just squat because I was so scared to look stupid. Now I'm like, oh well, I make all these stupid videos every day now, it's great, and I literally don't care. So funny. It's a massive transformation in my mindset for sure.
Has it been sort of like a very gradual change in those sort of first few days, weeks and months, every time you became a little less anxious? You mentioned the A word a little bit earlier. Did you become gradually a little bit less each day, and then at some point you just were like, shit, I'm not anxious anymore? Or were there some sort of like massive moments where the anxiety just kind of went in big chunks, like big swathes of confidence replaced it?
Do you know, if I'm honest, I think if you're somebody like me who has anxiety or is anxious about certain scenarios, I don't think you ever stop being anxious, or I don't think you ever stop having that or feeling that. I think it's more like I got to a point where I had to accept that if I wanted to step forward with anything in life, whether that be through this or anything, that unfortunately, like, you were going to have to get uncomfortable. So like, it was just accepting that, you know, if I was going to have to eventually speak on, say, an Instagram story, and yes, I'm going to be terrible at my first one, but I'm never going to be good at it if I don't do it. And I think that lesson of starting the Facebook group and doing that first live, I now apply it to absolutely everything. Like, so I still think it's terrifying at times, like it's scary. I do remember the first time we did this podcast and I was like absolutely terrified, and I'm like, do you know, I mean, you know, you worry a little bit, but now I'm like, yeah, that's fine, I could talk to anybody. And it's so weird. So I think like you always have to do the first thing. So starting that Facebook group and doing that first live, yes, was terrifying, but it does get easier. But I don't think you ever stop being anxious, and I don't think things become any less scary. I think you just have a better understanding of what comes from, you know, getting uncomfortable and doing scary things. And I think that's what I've really proven to myself, is that, like, you know, every little thing I've not really enjoyed doing, and only not enjoyed it because it's been terrifying, has always reaped the rewards. Do you know, like the first reel anyone makes is terrible. Now I'm like that, you know, firing them out all the time. Or I started my own podcast, the first episode was terrible, but now I'm on episode 9 and it's not. So like, yeah, everything's scary, and you know, you're always going to have those anxious feelings or feel uncomfortable or terrified. But I think that's one of the secrets to being successful, is that barrier. Like, you know, and too many people are too frightened to get close to that feeling of uncomfortable, but I always know that there's something good on the other side. So yeah.
Yeah, you're talking my language now, because these are all the same things that I've sort of realized with like if I use presenting on stage or even teaching a course, just sort of speaking to groups of people. I remember pacing up and down like in the service area of the SEN in Glasgow, which is where what was it called, SFN. There was like a fitness expo that used to be
I
hosted
remember
up
it.
there, and that was the first time I ever had a speaking slot on stage at a conference. And all the way up until it, I was like, oh, brilliant, I've been asked to do this thing. Now my name's next to Phil Lerney and Chris Burgess and Ben Coomber on the timetable. I'm like, fucking hell, that's like from a career perspective, that's massive. It doesn't get much bigger than that. And then on the day, the reality of shit, now I've actually got to go and stand on that stage and talk to people. And what made it even worse is the Jordan Fitness stand who I was working for was right next to the stage where I was going to be speaking. So I had to stand there all day and watch the 9 o'clock, the 10 o'clock, the 11 o'clock,
that's
the 12
awful.
o'clock. I had to watch every single one. And some of them, there was the first couple had like 2 people in the audience, 3 people, because like the start of the day, no one's in the venue yet. And my heart was like coming out of my chest when I had to go to my slot like 10 minutes before or whatever. There's like a 10-15 minute window in between, and the guy puts the mic on. It's the first time I've ever worn like a Britney Spears head mic, and it was all like I was all hooked up, testing, it's working. And he's like, right, you got like 5 minutes, look at the chairs, fucking empty, like literally not a person. So I was like, right, I'll go for a piss. So I went for a piss, thinking that when I come out, there's going to be like 50 people there. Came out, nobody. And I'm like, shit, I'm going to go for another piss. And I was standing there at the urinal. I was thinking, how can I get out of this? Like, is there like, maybe I could faint? Maybe I can just run out the back door. Like, I was like, honestly, I stood there thinking, how the fuck am I going to get out of this? Fast forward, I mean, it wasn't the best presentation I've ever done in my life by any means, but I did a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth, keep going, and now sort of 7 or 8 years later, I on Monday, so this will go out over the weekend, and on Monday the 21st, I'm delivering a session to the Mercedes Formula One Grand Prix team at their headquarters that's being filmed. So for anyone who can't get away from their desk to come and watch, it's being streamed live to like, I don't know, over 1,000 staff members.
That's crazy.
Like, it's ridiculous. And do you know what? I don't give a shit. I'm actually excited about it. And I'm so confident that I could walk into that environment having done no planning whatsoever, because I'm so comfortable. I trust myself to just be able to talk for an hour with like 3 or 4 bullet points, and to get across something that one of the richest sporting teams on the planet would find valuable. And it's really weird how the kind of that transition, and like the same as you, how often you see people that don't ever do something because they see other people being brilliant at that thing, and they don't join the dots together and realize how many times they had to fuck it up to gradually feel confident enough to be able to do a decent job of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And even like the videos or like the workouts that we did right at the beginning, and because they're live, like you have no idea the disasters that follow from that. And obviously everything went wrong, like everything went wrong all the time. But then because it was made to be like quite funny as well. This is quite a good point, is that when you do make a mistake, or when it does become a bit like, you know, I don't know, lights are switching off, Wi-Fi's dying, you say something stupid, the cat's running around the room, people almost go like, oh, you're a human being too, like you get it. And I think that like that's also really been quite advantageous for me too, is that I think showing up as that person and not trying to be that, you know, perfect person as well has really allowed a lot of people to connect with me. And often that was always the feedback, is like, you know, it's really nice to see someone else like ultimately make mistakes. And it's, you know, it's not to say that, you know, stand up in front of like hundreds of people and talk and, you know, make mistakes, but I think like having shown up like that and just accepted that, you know, I'm not perfect and I was never going to be, still not am, as people go, oh, actually Robyn's just a real human being too, and like that's okay. So yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of like, me and you know each other through the fitness industry, and we do very sort of similar jobs within the health and fitness world. But obviously, this isn't a podcast about health and fitness. So, we'll tap into work as we go along. But it's, as you mentioned earlier as well, it's very important things that translate into all other areas of life. And I can't help thinking that we are, as a society, with the massive increase in social media. I mean, I give social media a bit of a bashing most weeks. I fucking love social media. Without it, like, I wouldn't be able to do so many cool things, like keeping in touch with people on the other side of the planet, or sharing pictures of my dog or whatever. So I love social media, but at the same time, I massively see the flaws and the problems in it, with whereby we're exposed to a cropped, filtered, highlighted, edited version of everyone else's lives, that if you happen to be the type of person that's inclined to sit and look at stuff and assume that what you're seeing is 100% accurate, that person is that happy, they are that successful, they are that confident, they are that good looking, and if you believe all of those things, and then you look at yourself and go, fuck, I'm way behind. Like, there's no point me either bothering entering the race because everyone else is so far ahead. And it frustrates me that there might be people who stay in their little boxes and they don't take those risks or those 50-50 decisions, because they assume everyone else is so much better at them than at everything else. And that's not the reality. And when you are brave enough to kick down the walls and to give it a try, like, I'm really not very good at presenting. I definitely, if Mercedes Formula One team needed someone to go in and do some coaching for their staff, there are probably a million people ahead of me in the queue that deserve that. There's probably more than that, but there are millions of people that could do a better job, that deserve that job more than I do, that task more than I deserve it. But I understand also that there's so many more people that are doing so many other things that aren't even as good as me. And it wasn't until I started having the balls to do those things that you realise, hang on a minute, these people aren't that fucking good. They're not untouchable. They're not that much better than me, that I don't deserve to have a try. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And interestingly, what came to mind when you said that is about, I think as well, like when you take that, I think if you take the risk, like the first couple times, I think afterwards you become a lot more confident to do it again. Like, for example, when I started right at the beginning, I went to college for, funnily enough, to study business management. Who knew that years later that I would actually have really benefited from a business management course? But anyway, this is before I was a PT, and I think, like, you know, I and our family never had the money to support, you know, me doing PT like privately. Like, you know, they're about £2,500 or whatever. So I had like, I wanted to be a PT, I wanted to be in the industry, but, you know, had no qualifications, had no money, nobody had any money. So I went to college, and then basically like student loans were like, hey, here's 3 grand. And I was like, all right, well, here's 3 grand. What am I going to do with it? And then, you know, everyone around me was dead proud because I got into college, but I was doing a course that I never wanted to do. I was doing it as though society thinks that you should be doing these things. So anyway, took the 3 grand and was like, I'm off skis. Like, literally took the money and left college, which was fine. You can do that. So anyway, and that's then how I bought my PT qualification. And I remember it being split up in 2 parts as well. And obviously you do like your level 2 first. And I know I'm making this really fancy, I'm sorry. But again, I think the message in it is about the risk taking. So I had only just got qualified as a gym instructor, and I had a full-time job in Edinburgh, like with the Royal Society of Edinburgh. Now that job was like a shit hot job. And I got to meet like David Attenborough, like George Clooney, like all these really cool people, but I was miserable, like absolutely miserable, hated it. I was like crying at work because, you know, certain people around me were not maybe the fairest. Forgetting that they may listen to this, but anyway, sorry, I love you now. Everything's fine now. Anyway, so I remember, like, you know, being presented with this. So I obviously went to the gym myself, and then being presented with a 0-hour contract as a casual gym instructor, and all I had was 1 qualification, which was my level 2. And I remember, like, you know, people around me being like, don't be ridiculous, like, you can't do that, you've got a really good job, like, such a good salary, yada yada. But I was absolutely miserable. And I do remember my dad being like, you know, follow your dreams, like, he's that type of person, like, go and do what you want, you know, just take the chance. And I think, like, again, had I not taken that risk to just leave that job for a 0-hour contract, like, again, I proved to myself that, okay, and sometimes we do have to assess like the situation very carefully before we start jumping into taking risks. But again, it was that, well, you know, that was a really good job, I was getting paid really well, and I just took the risk and done it, and then look what happened following that. So I think the more I did that, the more I then became confident to almost listen to what the universe presented you with. Like, you almost had that kind of pivotal path of, like, you know, take the risk, see what happens. But yeah, I think too many people are too scared to see the other side of that and would rather be safe and comfortable. And I get it. I would rather be the most comfortable person because, you know, taking risks is you physically feel it. But I can almost guarantee 9 out of 10 times, although I'm still waiting for that to go wrong, is that something good will always come from it. Always, always. And I'm yet to be proven wrong on that, you know. So yeah, I think that the more that I did that as well, and I think social media is a hard one, and I think that one of my biggest things is promising to always show up as me. And I remember, like, a really well-known instructor, very famous, was like, oh, I'm so motivated every day. And I was like, bullshit, no, you're not. Like, stop telling people you are, because nobody is motivated every day, and it's such a bad message. And I was like that. So I decided to post something being like, I'm not motivated today, like the complete opposite. And guess what connected with more people? Again, showing up as that you know, real you. But I think it's so easy to get caught up with, like, you know, what are other people doing? They're better than you. And I suppose one of the best things I did this year is literally removing those people off my social media and literally remembering what lane that I'm in and who I'm doing it for. And that made a massive difference. Like, you know, literally blinkers are up and forgetting about what's going on around me. And that was the healthiest thing that I ever did as well.
That is a massive thing, because not only is that a difficult thing to do when you think you've got 800 friends and you're all of a sudden like culling them like some sort of social media genocide, like, and that's a difficult thing to do. A lot of people would struggle with that. But then it comes back to kind of another 2 points that you've mentioned about what are you doing it for. So like your job that you had, well paid, good job, a lot of people would have been envious, that's a cool job, meeting Attenborough and Clooney, etc, etc. Like, why would you give all of that up for a 0-hour contract at a leisure centre teaching some old ladies how to do leg bums and tums? That doesn't make any sense. You go, yeah, but it depends what's motivating you. If your motivation is to get a selfie with Clooney, then of course you're an idiot to give that up. But then what does that achieve? Like, it impresses the friends that aren't really your friends. You're doing it for their purposes. What is it that motivates you? And your motivation wasn't doing that job because you weren't happy, you weren't satisfied, you were miserable, in your own words, thanks to some unnamed colleagues, ex-colleagues, who may listen to this. It wasn't you, Bob. Don't worry, Bob. It wasn't you. But what motivated you was being happy in your work, earning less, meeting less A-list celebrities, and having less security. That didn't matter to you. So why the fuck should that matter to anybody else? So on one hand, you've taken a risk. On the other hand, you haven't. You've taken no risk at all. You've just steered into a different lane of what motivates you, and further down that line, you've been rewarded with financial security because you found something that you enjoyed so much, and then you found a way of doing that made financial sense. But that wasn't the aim and the purpose. So you win.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite interesting actually when you put it that way. It's almost like you're like a magnetic to your own kind of values and like what you're aligned to do. I think sometimes people do miss that. Like they do miss that. And I think that yeah, I was definitely called towards the fitness industry anyway, somewhere or another.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm going to move into my first question. I don't like to rush these things. My first of my 4 questions. So we know a little bit. We know about what Robyn does, but question 1 is, who is Robyn Drummond? Who are you?
Okay, so I think this question, more so recently I actually think I've been actively working on this, because I think we often identify as the job that we do. And it wasn't until I did a webinar recently and I was like, who am I? And I was like, you know what? I'm Robyn, who drinks a gin at the weekend, who loves the middle aisle of Aldi's. I cannot stop shopping in Aldi. I come home with the amount of shit from Aldi's. I have an inflatable chair downstairs that's half inflated just because I wanted it, and it's not even doing its job. I'm the same. Literally,
yeah. I go out for bread and milk, and I come home with another set of spanners and a fucking barbecue cover that I don't need. I'm like, oh, but it was on offer.
I know, and I was like, oh, I need an inflatable chair, and it's the biggest piece of shit ever. It doesn't even do its job. Like, it's ridiculous. But anyway, I absolutely love that. And yeah, I'm like, who actually am I? I think, it's a funny one. I'm always the loudest person in the room. Like, I think I grew up with my mum always saying, like, Robyn, stop shouting. And I'm like, but I need to be heard. And I think there's a message in that as well. But yeah, I think more so recently I've tried to not identify as like, hey, I'm the founder of RDF and this is what I do. But actually, like, who actually am I? And, I'm a bit chaotic. I love being out at the weekends. I love good music, love a good gin, love good food. And that's why I think that then, like, I try and, like, teach that message to other people and buy shit at Aldi. I give everybody full permission to go and do that. But at the moment, I think I'm very much on this massive discovery of really who I am. Like, I think, like, when we spoke there, like, the person that I was when we first met, the person that I am now is a completely different person. So, maybe half of that is I don't fully know, but I'm definitely learning, especially what I'm capable of. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's a fascinating question, and it always interests and intrigues me to see people when I ask that question. And the reason I do it is because, I don't know, if this was an interview on the Jonathan Ross show and it's going out at 9 o'clock on Saturday night, it would be a bullshitty 4-minute interview that would be all like, I don't know, like rainbows and like buttercups, and everything would be happy and positive, and you'd have this like little bullshitty scripted answer of who I am, and everyone would go, oh my god, that's so amazing. and it would make fuck all difference to their lives. And I think that's all bullshit. Like, the more and more I've dealt with big famous names, or just more people like the peasants in the trenches, I sort of I work with lots of different people, and I don't really think people are peasants, by the way. It's just like my way of describing myself and the rest of the great unwashed. But you kind of, I sort of see through so much bullshit, and I'm like, I see and hear things on the news, on TV, and I'm like, that's all bollocks. Like this, why can't people just be honest and vulnerable? And when I ask them, who is Robyn Drummond, like, why can't they just go, do you know what? I don't really fucking know. I know that I used to be really, really anxious and I lacked confidence, and I know I've improved, and I kind of think I know why I've improved, but fuck me, I've got a long way to go, and I'm still desperately trying to learn and figure it out. And maybe if you ask me in 10 years, I might have a slightly better idea of who I am, but I still won't know for sure. And to me, like, that's absolutely fine, because if a million people listened to that, they would probably get far more from it than hearing someone say, well, I'm just blah, 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 and give some bollocks, like, wishy-washy answer that doesn't actually mean anything, and it's definitely not actually true.
Yeah, I agree. And it's actually, it was funny that, you know, you asked me that too, because I was presented with it a few weeks ago, and it was someone that basically was telling me that too, like, stop being your job as well. And I think it just comes back down to the same thing I said. The more of the real that you present, well, in whatever situation that is, I just think you are far, far, far more relatable. And I think so many people are so scared to show up as themselves. And I literally did a social media post about this the other day, and very surprisingly, it did very well again.
Yeah.
Because I was like, do you know what? Like, I'm not ever, like, I am no longer fitting into boxes anymore. Like, I am no longer trying to mold myself into being someone that I think society wants me to be. And I think the more that people stop trying to do that and show up as them, the more likable they become, more relatable they become. And yeah, they will take more from that, you know, rather than showing up being like giving people what they think they want to hear, which is complete shit, because that's how a lot of the lessons that I learned from 17 till now, like 10 years later, was that I did things because I thought that the fitness world would want me to do it, as opposed to just turning up as me and actually doing the wrong things. Well, they weren't wrong things, they were lessons, but doing those things were what gave me the lessons to be me. But yeah, I definitely think a lot of people are far too scared to ultimately show up as them. It's easier to stay quiet, it's easier to fit in, it's easier just to, you know, be part of the group. But actually, like, I think the last few months I've actually enjoyed not being. It's quite exciting when you just finally say, nah, I'm just gonna be me.
it is like a weight lifted off your shoulder, because then all of a sudden you don't have the pressure of having to play a part, like, to, oh, I need to remember my lines, I need to rehearse the script, I need to fabricate this false person, and all of a sudden, like, you don't have to give a shit about that anymore, and things become so much easier. You then have more room upstairs to sort of do stuff that you do enjoy, stuff that does make you happy, that makes you content, even if that is laying on the sofa scratching your ass for half an hour. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, we all enjoy it. But like, let's not pretend that we don't. Like, no, I'm a go-getter. I get up at 5 and I go to bed at 10, and I don't stop from start to finish. Like, well, more for you.
Yeah, exactly. I remember having this conversation on social media recently about it, and I'm like, you know, I think it's really difficult. Like, I think I've been definitely subject to both sides, especially in business, in terms of like shaping who or what I should be doing in order to run a successful business. And I think it's so hard because we often do see the whole 5 a.m. thing, like, get up. And I always remember I did learn from your, you know, like, thank fuck it's Monday, to always make your bed. And like, I totally agree with it. But there's some days I can't be arsed. Like, there's some days I want to sleep till 8 a.m. There's some days that, you know what, if I don't make my bed today, okay, the world isn't going to end tomorrow. But like, obviously the deeper meaning in that is so true. But you know, it's like, okay, well, if I want to sit and watch the Kardashians and have a gin at 5 p.m, then do you know what? Unfortunately, you know, I'm going to do that. But like,
why wait till 5? Do it at 2.
I know. May as well just crack it open just now. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. But yeah, I think that like I definitely have. It's hard not to get caught up on that as well, because sometimes I could then compare myself to be like, well, if I'm not doing those things, that means I'm not successful, or I'm not going to have the success that I want to gain out of my business from not. Like, don't get me wrong, more days than not, yes, I have to get up at 5 because that's when Liam does. That's because of our life, not because I'm actually actively choosing to. It does help a little bit, I must say. You know, you kind of awake before the rest of the world. I do like it, but I think that it just, again, paints this perfect, like, oh, you will be successful if you do those things. But actually, you know what? Like, if you're really rough on a Sunday and you can't be arsed doing anything, like, that's also okay.
Yeah,
and
absolutely. It drove me mad. I can't remember when it was. A few years ago, there was like a little meme or graphic that was going round, and it was Mark Wahlberg's like daily itinerary, and it was like Mark Wahlberg gets up at 3 a.m. and he meditates, he goes to the gym, he has his dinner, he spends time with his kids, like blah 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 blah, he does some work, he does all these things, and then he goes to bed at 6 p.m. What a hero. He's such a hero because he gets up at 3 a.m. and does all these things. I'm like, hang on a minute, if he got up at 7 and went to bed at 10, he could still do exactly the same fucking things. All he's done is moved the numbers forwards a few hours. Like, who gives a fuck? Like, what about if you get up at 10 a.m. and go to bed at midnight? You've still done all of the same shit that Mark Wahlberg, the hero, has done in his day. Like, he hasn't done anything special other than started early and finished early. Like, he's on the early shift. Big deal. That's no different to the late shift.
Absolutely agree with that. 100%. It is very easy to get caught up on that. Definitely.
Yeah.
Makes no difference. It really doesn't.
But you see, people would look at that and be like, right, the only way I'm going to succeed is by setting my alarm at 3 a.m. Like, well, but your life might, if you've got kids, that might not work. Like, I don't know. It drives me mad. People like going mad about how amazing it is, and no one's brave enough to go, it just doesn't make sense. Like, who gives a fuck? Most importantly, Robyn, I've got a question for you. You mentioned earlier about how growing up you were always the loudest person in the room, and then you also talked about anxiety and being anxious. And then let's say if we take to your, like, I don't know, your late teens, as you're then starting to enter the working world, and like the nerves, the anxiousness, like to do things and to put yourself out there. Is there any correlation between those two? Like, have you ever thought about that or considered that? Like, are they just two opposing things? Like, you used to be really loud and confident, or was that loudness and that confidence part of the anxiety? And in brackets, the only reason I ask that is because I was exactly the same. I was always, I wanted to be the big fish in a small pond. Like, if someone needed to stand on the bar with their pants around their ankles in the rugby club, I was at the front of the queue. If someone needed to stand on a table and sing a song, like, I was at the front of the queue. And I kind of did all of these things to be the jester, like to be the class clown, to be the fucking village idiot. I was all of those things. And then in later life, I think I did all those things to try to prove to myself that I wasn't so shy and embarrassed, and like, I much prefer to not be the center of attention. And I think I was kind of trying to prove myself wrong by putting myself in those very uncomfortable positions.
I think that's really, do you know what, if I'm honest, I've actually probably never thought about, you know, like, what did that loudness really represent in terms of, like, you know, what then sometimes displays on the flip side of that. you know, we could go into the ADHD thing in a moment, because I now have an actual explanation for a lot of things, which is quite good. But I think sometimes, like, a lot of it is being heard, maybe with a fear of not being heard. Like, so trying to make yourself the loudest because potentially, you know, maybe you're worried that, you know, no one's going to listen, or so you're going to make people listen.
Yeah.
But it's funny, I always remember growing up, and yeah, I was definitely the loudest. I always wanted more. Like, I was always like, I was the one that always had to have the last words all the time. I'm just remembering like my mum and dad like saying like all these things, always the loudest. I was really money orientated when I was younger too. And I don't know if it's because we never really had any, but then my sister wasn't like that. But then looking now, I'm not remotely driven by making lots of money and being very successful, but I think a lot of these things I somewhat understand in terms of like how I am now, in terms of the way I work, do you know? And like, so what I mean is, I'm now not scared to say how I feel about something, and that someone might not agree with that, and that's okay, but I'm not scared to speak up about it, which I've never been scared to do that, albeit can be a very anxious person, do you know? So I think it's really interesting, the contrast of the two, is because it's like so a lot of people would think I would be really confident, and like I've always grown up, people would think, oh, she's really confident, but yeah, or was actually the complete opposite. And I think it was because maybe like I did come off a complete opposite way, but maybe it is about that. And I think that then I now have an official diagnosis as of February that I actually have ADHD, this is a huge topic though. And I think then a lot of the things that, you know, I did, probably the young person up until now, you know, that definitely is now justified 100%. And as a byproduct, anxiety and depression are very commonly associated with that in females. So often females are, you know, they'll maybe go to the GP, need help or whatever it may be, and it's often like, you know, you've got anxiety, like you maybe struggling with depression, like, but no one ever really explores it any more than that, and you're often just told like, you know, here's medication and go and exercise, have a healthy lifestyle, that's fine. But I think now more so, especially this year, a lot of women are becoming very educated, and a lot more research are being done in terms of anxiety and depression can be a byproduct of females that have ADHD, because ultimately you're not a young boy, which is like, you know, that typical stereotypical ADHD 11-year-old boy that's screaming their head off. So I think that like for me, a lot of the things that I did in terms of being loud and, you know, always causing a scene, or just ridiculous things like kicking the wall when I was raging, like, you know, I definitely had holes in my door. Quite a rad child, if I'm honest, now makes sense in that respect. Like I now have a better understanding in terms of why I did a lot of the things, but in terms of the correlation of the two, I think it's a funny one. I think it is definitely maybe a form of what people call masking. Like it's almost like you don't want to be seen as someone that's like really shy and anxious. So maybe the fear of like not being heard or listened to. So trying to be the loudest person. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely not a psychologist or a psychotherapist, so I've definitely not got any answers or solutions. It was just sort of interested me just to hear it like that, loudest in the room, and then I'm really anxious. I was like, okay, well, what happens in there? I sort of like I'm thinking out loud here. Like, is there children are often very fearless? Like I've got well, I say a 2-year-old, she turned 3 a few days ago, so as a 3-year-old now, she will say anything, she doesn't care, like, because she hasn't learned to understand the consequences. So I suppose as you grow older, you become more and more aware of other people, their thoughts and their feelings and their perception of you. So it probably makes sense that a child might be really loud, and that then as an adolescent or as a teenager going into adulthood, you might then start to become a lot more conscious of the world around you and how it looks at you. So it's probably, I don't think it's an isolated incident. It just it reflected sort of my journey as well, and I've got no answers. I just thought I would touch on it.
Yeah, I think that and it's funny because a lot of my fears definitely came when I was older. Like, you know, I didn't really, or I suppose some of them may have been influenced by, like, you know, my mum doesn't like a bounty, so automatically I don't like now, and I never have liked bounty, which is funny. So yeah, some fears do come from, like, you know, the environment that you are brought up in, but a lot more of my fears have come from being older. And again, I'm not, you know, intending on getting like big, deep and meaningful today, but I think, like, you know, for a small period of my life, maybe when I was 16, went through something quite, you know, quite bad, that I definitely believe then had a lot to do with the way that I am now, in terms of, like, you know, how do I go from being this, like, you know, chaotic child, really loud, you know, like, look at me. And I do think that my own personal situation, that incident, has definitely impacted then as I've got older. So in terms of, like, having my confidence shattered, my self-esteem shattered, having like problems trusting other people. And I think that then, you know, fear does manifest. So from a lot of that, you know, like, I used to love flying on planes, but then I had one incident where it was honestly nothing. Well, I thought I was going to die. Like, the plane was like going up, down, left and right at one time as we were taking off, and that was it. My life was over. So now every single time I absolutely hate flying, but I'll do it. But yeah, I think definitely, I think for me personally in my life, like, there was that one incident that had such an impact on then growing up, which then I had to overcome. So I think, like, you know, growing up super confident, yeah, loud, you know, and then incident makes it really, really bad. And then, you know, having to overcome that, which I've definitely done a very great job in doing. Not on my own, definitely supported to, you know, to overcome a lot of those things.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that sort of, this incident in your late teens was then like probably the catalyst for the anxiety and bring the barriers down, the lack of confidence. I'm going to stay within my safe boundaries, that then you've had to overcome from a work sense to do the things that you've done.
Yeah, and I actually believe that a lot of what I do now to help other people stems from that. I do believe, like, so I think, like, a lot of people in life may take really traumatic situations and almost like identify as them, which I totally understand. Everybody has, you know, different coping mechanisms in certain scenarios. But I think that, like, the best thing I ever did was maybe 3 years ago was start to seek meaning in a lot of the things that had happened in my life. So, like, you know, I will never ever hate the person that, you know, like, influenced the things that did happen. However, I'm very grateful to that individual for that happening, because if they hadn't, I would never be the person I was today.
Yeah.
So if I hadn't gone through that situation, I would 100% probably not have been the person that I am today, because I think that, like, and as I say, it's so easy to see these scenarios, identify as them, never let them go, never look into them. But actually then, like, you know, I'm very grateful that that happened in my life, which almost sounds a bit ridiculous to some people. Because yeah, like, had I then never had that, I would definitely 100% have never gone through the process of overcoming it. So then I do believe that's why a lot of my personality is very much, I'm a helper. Like, I want to help other people. I don't want other people to struggle. I don't want other people to be in pain. I don't want other people to be mistreated or fed lies and bullshit. So, you know, it's like I literally make that my mission on a daily basis, so that other people don't experience that. Whether that looks like, obviously, like, not in a relationship terms, but more like, you know, at 17 I was fed complete bullshit in terms of, like, oh, hey, if you want to get thinner, this is all the things that you have to do. And actually all the stuff that I did end up making things a lot worse. And because of the total, like, lies and, you know, diet nonsense, you know, then that had an impact on me. So I think, like, a combination of those 2-3 years, an incident wasn't just dieting, by the way. That was on top of it. I was like, yeah, I'm going to go change my life. I'm going to be a bodybuilder. Woohoo. And I think, like, the combination of that 2 years had such an, like, it really makes sense in terms of, like, now why I do what I do, is that I never want anybody to feel like that ever. And then I feel like I wake up and I have to go and help other people.
Yeah, I get it. So from previous chats that we've had in recent years, there's sort of I don't, it might not fall in the eating disorder category, and you excuse my ignorance on the subject because I'm a fucking pig. I'll eat everything and anything, and I've sort of that's been my only ever problem with food. But we've spoken about it before, and how that kind of that unhealthy association with food, with eating, in the attempt to try and achieve these arbitrary made up goals that you've then kind of overcome and realize that actually it is possible to have a very healthy association with food and drink, and that you can have different goals that aren't only being thin, being light, having less fat. Because when you kind of okay, you can't tar everyone with the same brush, but a lot of people that go down any goal, whether it's how much money you earn or whether it's how much weight you can lose, like when you draw a line in the sand and you get to that line, then what? And what most people do is it's not enough. They want more, and then they want more, and then they want more. And then if getting down to 8 stone, you achieve that, but so and so 7.5. I want to get to 7.5. Now the 7. Well, what are you gonna do? You're gonna get to 0? Like, you're gonna weigh nothing. Like, you'll be dead before then. So it just becomes this never-ending. Like, you're never actually satisfied. It's difficult to become satisfied. When I earn 10 grand, I'm going to be happy. Yeah, but he's just earned 11. Oh, bastard! Now I need to fucking earn 12. Like, but what's the purpose? What's the goal? Like, that's not a healthy way to always set goals, as you're now finding with the work you do with so many people.
Yeah, I actually love this discussion. I had it we spoke about this at the weekend, and it literally applies to everything, whether that be like, I remember the moment I stepped off stage and been like, well, what now? And I was like, this isn't how I thought it would feel. And then I repeated the same cycle again. I think going into competing was more like I thought I had to look like someone else for people to take me seriously. And if I didn't look like someone with abs, then I wouldn't be successful. I was looking at all these famous bodybuilder female athletes and like, oh, well, if they can get fame through that, then people will hear me and see me if I look like that. I was completely opposite. Like, it was the complete opposite, because now I'm the total opposite, and now people listen, funnily enough. But yeah, we definitely had this discussion the weekend in terms of right now, for example, building a website has taken me 10 months. So, it's very like the process now feels like I'm dragging my feet through mud. It's very hard. It's very painful. It's very uncomfortable. But I think what happens is no matter what goal it is, often people forget that actually the best part was the journey to get there. And we often miss that too late. So we often, like, for example, I'm going to launch a website in 12 days. I'm excited for it to finish because I'm excited to have time off. I'm excited for other people to experience it, but also it's so easy to forget that the best part of that was the whole build up to it. And that's applied to anything. And I think that, like, whether you're trying to, I don't know, lose body fat or whatever goal that you're striving for, it's actually the journey to the goal is the feeling that you are trying. It's almost the feeling that you are craving for at the end was actually the experience up until that. And in terms of like when is enough? Again, we had this discussion. It's like, so for example, like making 10 grand a month, what does 15 actually bring you? Like, what does that extra 5 actually look like? And sometimes it's not very much. Like, I think sometimes, what point do you get where, it's just going to be reinvested, or you're just going to spend more money on shit, really, to be honest? Or like, what does it actually mean? Because I think I was at a conference and it was so intriguing, because like you had half the room who were, like their values were like family and health and happiness, love the family holiday, like, being able to do that 2 or 3 times a year, when someone might never have been able to do that. And for them, that's enough. Then the other half of the room is very much like, I want to make lots of money. I want to be 6-7 figure, business coach or whatever it may be. But I'm like, but what does that actually give you? Like, okay, you might go live in Dubai. You might have a really fancy watch. Like, if that's what you value, then that's absolutely fine. But I think that, like, God, I never, probably at 27, thought someone would be like constantly asking me about my values. I didn't even know what the word meant at the start of this year. But actually, when you start to understand what what is meaningful to you, what do you actually want in life? You know, I asked my partner that, and he's like, I can't even think, you know, 2 days in advance. I'm like, but you have to understand what's important to you and what do you value. And I think that can really help when, you know, when the money thing, especially with the money thing as well, because that's right, you always want more, or you might always want more, and it's like, when is enough enough? What does it actually bring you? And a lot of the times it's always happiness that people associate it with. So it's like, lose body fat, I'm going to be happier. You know, make more money, I'm going to be happier. I'm going to do this and I'll be happy. But actually, like, you're not, you never are. And I think that that's when you just miss everything that's going around you that actually was your happiest. Like, or I'm not going to lie, building a website is not exactly the most fun thing to do, but you know, it's been an incredibly, you know, insightful journey. But yeah, I think I was always like, you know, if I get to this point, okay, great, I need to think of the next step. But actually, I'm often reminded, like, you need to stop and actually be present and enjoy the moment. And it's often we are very bad at that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I the last episode that I shared last week was Stephen Aish, who like
Yeah.
the mindset guru, as it were, and I've talked to him for years about these types of things, and one of the most important things he ever said to me was about happiness isn't the destination, happiness is the journey.
Yeah.
And as soon as you acknowledge that, it changes so much, because having a pair of shoes, a fancy watch, a handbag, a certain car, a certain house or whatever, there's nothing wrong with anybody who's got any of those things. But if your goal in life is to have that watch, yes, that might bring you some value in some areas, but what does it actually do? Does it give you long-term happiness forever, or if the happiness lies in the journey to earn the money to buy the watch, that changes everything, because now you're enjoying the process of what you do, and the side effect from that is you've become so successful at it that you can afford to buy a watch if that's what you want to spunk your money on. That's very different to just, I need that watch. Because when you've got that watch, somebody else will have a better watch, and then somebody else will have an even better one and an even better one. And before you know it, you won't be happy because you've got the thing you thought was going to make you happy. And now you're not happy because someone else is thinner, someone's more muscly, someone else has got a better pair of shoes or a more expensive handbag, a bigger car, or whatever it is that you've hung your hat on as being the thing that's going to make you happy. And it's changed the way I view things a hell of a lot, and it's made me appreciate a lot more the importance of just enjoying what I'm doing, even if I don't really know what the end game is, because it changes every week when someone new gives me a new idea or a new suggestion. I'm like, oh yeah, fuck it, I'll do that. It just sort of, it doesn't really matter. And really interesting thing from my chat with Steve was he sort of said to me on the show last week, again I'm paraphrasing, but something like, it's like, you're a human being. So like, yeah, human being. He's like, you're not a human having, you're not a human doing, you're a human being. So what if, yes, I love doing stuff and I love having stuff, but I've got like a baseline foundation where I'm just now really, really comfortable just being. And that might be doing nothing and having nothing. But I'm content with that bottom layer. And that now makes it so much easier to have stuff and do stuff, because I'm finding a way of just being happy.
Yeah.
Just by being, not by doing or having. Does that make sense? In my head, it sounds like fucking radio gold, but
I think it makes perfect sense. I think I actually would probably say that's one of the one things that I'm really guilty of is the whole being, I would say. I also partly blame that on, you know, having ADHD. It's really weird talking about ADHD. I don't often talk about it, so it often sounds weird when I try and say I have ADHD, and it's only because not many people listen when I say it, but anyway, and I think that the problem is that I'm constantly, the way that my brain is designed is I'm constantly thinking about the next thing. Like I'm like, oh my god, new idea, I'm gonna go do it, you know. And I think that, you know, I have been reminded recently in terms of like, when are you going to just stop and enjoy the moment? And I'm like, that I literally can't, like I literally. But I must say it's hard, because when you're also trying to develop something and you're kind of in this middle stage of, you know, for me, it's like growing up and, you know, developing the business. Like it's very hard to just be. I personally think it's very hard to just be. But like I know that that moment will come, or so I keep telling myself, that like once I get to the point that I feel most content in, because things are a work in progress, and I know that they're nearly finished. And I think that once that point, hopefully, I say hopefully, fingers crossed, that I don't go, I'm going to now, you know, create an app. God. I think that then I will be able to be a little bit more present. I'm very guilty of that just now.
And you sort of, there's no rule that says you have to be 100% content with just being 100% of the time. That's impossible. Even like the most, like the strictest Buddhist monk in the world is gonna have moments when they just want to fucking kick a hole in the door. But
I'm really good at that.
well, it sounds like it, yeah. But if at the minute 10% of the time you're okay with just being, what if that can ramp up to 12%? Like that's all it needs in the short term. And then what if it goes up to 15%? Like what if it just gets 1% better every year? Fuck me, that's better than nothing. It's better than going backwards and like being more obsessed with doing things and having things. And I've put this small print in there because sometimes thick people listen to me say things like that and they're like, oh, so we're not supposed to do things, not supposed to have things. That's not what I'm saying. Do things and have things. But there's a very important underlying thing that if you are not content with just yourself and the way you are, then you can have and do all the fucking things in the world and they will probably make no difference to your satisfaction in life.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is so right. And I think then that literally comes from within. I would definitely say in my own life that has been the biggest change in the last 2 years, possibly more so now. In terms of a scale weight, I'm the heaviest I've ever been, but I'm the most content I've ever been within myself, that I don't hate myself. So how does someone go from being literally like 17 and 3 stone lighter to 10 years later being actually heavier but more content? Like, so it's almost
but clearly body weight and body fat are not parameters by which Robyn Drummond is measuring happiness. Like,
oh no,
there might be some people on the planet who do, and there's nothing wrong with that if that is them. But you've been around the block a few times, so have I. I've worked with more 30 to 50-year-old females because that's the most popular demographic of all personal training clients, and many of them might be slightly misinformed that they think I need to get to 10 stone. I need like this magical, like I need to be under 10 stone, or I need to be a size 10, or I need to have less than 15% body fat, or whatever it is. And like, but where does it end? Like where does the line get drawn?
Yeah.
And how is it actually going to change it? Because if you're 10 stone and 1 ounce, are you going to be fucking depressed? But if you go for a big piss and now you're 1 ounce under 10 stone, you're going to be really happy. Like what? How does that work? Like it's not quite that simple.
No, I think we definitely, that is like anything, literally, as we just said, we like fixate on those things equaling, you know, we'll be happy when, but actually like, I think we need to be more focused on the present and the now.
I'm making this up as I go along here, but I wonder whether that is kind of like a subconscious fear of having to tap into your own mind to argue with yourself, to prove yourself wrong, to give yourself a fucking slap round the face and to say, listen, dickhead, you're going about this all the wrong ways. You need to look, it's not everyone else's fault. It's all in inside you, and you are the one that are holding yourself back. But to mask over that, we'll probably go, no. I'm gonna buy a new Audi, and when I get that Audi, I'll be happy, and I'll fucking prove you wrong. Don't you dare tell me it's my fault, because that Audi is gonna make me happy. And then when I get an Audi, someone else has got a fucking Lamborghini. I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake, now I need a Lamborghini. I wonder whether it's sort of like a subliminal, subconscious barrier that gives us a mythical target that we think is going to make us happy, as a way to avoid having to look introspectively. I don't even know if that's a word, it might not be, but to look inwards at how actually we might need to change the way we're playing the game a little bit.
Yeah, I think too many people are often too scared to sit with their own feelings, like, and that it can often be a very scary thing. It's why people avoid things like yoga or meditations, like or do mindfulness work, because you are literally at one with your own thoughts, and that for some can be a very scary place. Like, so a lot of people, if they go for a walk, will always put a podcast in. Don't get me wrong, for me that's a time-saving technique so that I can do both at the same time. But often people will not go for a walk without any music because they will not be within themselves. And it's often, sometimes we do need to call out the bullshit with ourselves. Like, we actually need to call ourselves out. And yeah, I think it can be. It's also another reason why a lot of people are really busy or try to be as busy as possible, because they are avoiding that. And that's another thing is, you know, like if I'm just really, really super busy, then I don't actually have to like come to terms with like what's actually going on. I often see that in some of my clients as well. Like, they totally avoid the problem because, or they try to be as busy as possible to avoid the problems that are going. But I must say, buying my car never brought me happiness, right? But see, the moment that he went, are you taking it out on finance or are you PCPing it? I went,
do you take
buying
MasterCard?
it cash, mate. I was like, buying it cash, mate.
I've got this suitcase of £10 notes here. Is that any good to you?
Like, you know, here you go. No, and that's probably the only time I've ever literally said those words out loud. And please, nobody judge me for that. But I must say it was quite a funny moment. And I think that, like, yeah, I think that people do these things for sheer happiness. I think that they will. I think, like, what's really funny is that I probably did that very proudly, but because it's funny when you mentioned Mercedes, I was like, I'm part of the Mercedes crew. I love my car. And I think for me, right, it wasn't really about it was going to bring me happiness. I think a lot of the times when I was younger, I would not have felt worthy of having something good, or being able to be confident to buy something good. So I think that, like, I remember when Liam got like a North Face jacket for Christmas, like, not that I'm, you know, turning this into big, I'm not materialistic in the slightest, that I'm definitely not. But I remember he got this jacket and I was like, oh my God, I've never had a good jacket, like never. And this was only 3 years ago. And like, his mum bought me this for Christmas, and like, I never really had anything like that, or never had a good jacket. You know, I went to Mountain Warehouse in Regatta, and I love my Mountain Warehouse jackets. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. And that's, you know, that was fine. But then seeing him like have this stuff, and I'm like, oh, you know, I've never had this stuff before. Anyway, I remember the very, very first thing I ever bought. I remember, in fact, this is really funny. I remember my MacBook, and I remember texting my dad, because, you know, he always tells me, like, go and do these things. Like, he'll give me the permission to do it. And I still financed it with Apple over 12 months because I was too scared to pay the money. And I think it was more like, you know, do I deserve to actually have this? And this was right at the start of becoming an online coach. And my dad was like, don't worry, it'll be worth it. You'll make it back and stuff. And I'm like, oh God, now what happens if I don't? I'm paying like 50 quid a month for this laptop. And it was just, yeah, I definitely wouldn't say that, like, I definitely associate these more materialistic things with happiness. For me, it was about, you know, not having the confidence to do it. I can also be quite impulsive, which is a problem when it comes to buying things. But now it's like, you know what, like, I can have a Costa 3 times a week. Like, I never would have done that. Like, I never would have treated myself to coffee because I couldn't afford to do it, or I would never have been like, let's go for a good meal. Like, that's the type of shit that makes me so happy. It's like saying to Liam, let's go for good food. Like, because I have never been able to do that in my life, ever. So that kind of stuff is the coolest thing.
There's a massive difference between your next door neighbor gets a new car, so you need to go and get a better
Yeah.
car that you can't afford, but the only way you can afford it is to take out a £200 a month finance for 5 years, and that cripples you because you probably actually can't afford it, but it gives you one over on the guy next door, which then makes you happy. But there's a massive difference between doing that and just walking into the dealership and saying, do you want 20 grand's worth of £50 notes? Is that, do you take 50s? Because if not, I can change this to 20s, and I'll take that one, please. And having the confidence to not only to be able to afford it because you're paying for it up front, but the confidence in that all of the work you've done to earn that money gives you that feeling that you deserve to have that car, rather than I need to have it to have a better car than someone else.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely, 100%. And you are literally only like, this is something that, not that I was competitive with anybody. I think as a younger person, it's so easy to compare yourself to other people, like going back to social media. And I think it's so easy to like look at, especially like in, you know, this industry, you can think about all these people that are doing really well, or they've got X amount of followers, which means they're doing really well, all this carry on. And it's so easy to compare yourself to other people. But I think the sooner that I realised that you are literally only in competition with yourself, the better. And it's such a more pleasant and happier place to be. Like, it's literally staying in your own lane is such, you know, and because I remember competing was a really toxic environment for me, because you would be told who was competing in that show. So of course what you were doing was literally then scrolling and finding them on Facebook and finding them on Instagram, comparing yourself. That is so bad. And I'm like, wait a minute, like, you know, stay in your lane, focus on you. And it is the most, I think that brings you a lot of contentness as well, because like you're literally only focusing on what you're doing. Like, I have no desire to sit and look at what other people are doing ever. I would say though, that's not 100%. Like a few years ago, I probably would have been like, oh, maybe I should do what they're doing because that's bringing them X. But and maybe that comes from a confidence thing as well, being confident to know that you are doing the right thing, and you are on the right track.
Do you know, I had a client, a lady who I'm still friends with, speak to her every now and then, but I trained her online about, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago maybe, and I'd known her before that, and she sort of contacted me to say, I'm entering a competition which is kind of, it's judged in 2 ways. There's like physique, but also strength as well. So she's like, I was wondering if you would coach me for the competition. So I was like, yeah, no worries. Like, how, we've got like 6 months, whatever. So I sort of spoke to her every now and then online, and I did all of her programming online, and she was really good at she did what she was told.
Yeah.
And about 2 or 3 days before the competition, I had like 3 missed calls from her, and I was like, oh fucking hell, what's wrong? Like, must be panicking or something. And I rang her, and she was like, Mark, I'm so sorry. I was like, what? She's like, I'm so sorry. I've let you down. I've wasted your time. And I was like, what's going on? And she said, I'm not going to go to the competition. I was like, right, okay. I don't give a shit. Like, what? Why not? Why do you feel like you've let me down? And she's like, well, the reason that I've paid you to train me and to coach me, and I want you to sort of be able to then say, this is who I've worked with and this is what they've done. So that's why I feel bad. She said, but I'm not going. The reason I'm not going is because I've realised why I entered the competition. And she was like, I entered the competition to give myself, like, I don't know, something to hold me accountable, to get me into a routine, to get my training back on track, and to achieve the things that I knew I was capable of. But now I know that I'm capable of them.
Yeah.
I don't need to go and be judged, and I don't need to go and get a rosette in a competition in a village hall somewhere to get anyone else's permission to be successful. And I was like, fuck me, that's the best thing I've ever heard in my life, because like that's the whole point. Like, it might not matter. Like, why do you need to be judged by some other people when you've achieved the things you wanted to achieve. Like shout out to Veronica for her enlightenment. And it was like she was so upset because she thought she'd have let me down. And how many dickhead online physique coaches might have been pissed off about that because they put all that effort in. No, I need the photos of you on stage because that's going to help me with my marketing. It's not fucking about me. Like, what sort of selfish cunt makes it about them? Like, it's about you. Like, and if you've realized you don't need that public I don't know, that
external validation, basically.
Yeah. You've already won, so fuck the competition.
Yeah, exactly. You 100%. I totally agree. Definitely.
Robyn, I'm going to ask you question 2. About 20 minutes ago, there was like a real smooth, perfect segue into it, but then I carried on asking you other questions. Question 2: what is the meaning of life? And I've got in brackets, why do some people struggle with it? And you were sort of touching on a few things before the last chunk of the conversation, and I was enjoying what you were saying, so I prodded you more. But what, in your opinion, what is the meaning of life to you?
I think where I'm at in my life right now, I feel like, and I think this will be an evolving thing. I don't think there's a complete definition of it. I don't think we'll ever really truly understand that question. But I think for me, what like that means for me is like the freedom to live. So before, and I sometimes feel really privileged saying that, like, because I know that everybody doesn't work for themselves, or doesn't have that freedom in terms of work. But for me, like, the fact that I can go for a walk and not be in a hurry to be back somewhere, like, and just to be, like, almost like being able to, at times we've just jumped on a plane and like went to Spain because we could do that. And I think for me, it's freedom. That's only half of it. So I think that, like, that's why now
I knew you would get the F word in there somewhere.
Oh
freedom.
Yeah, I was getting 100 freedom. Yeah, no, sorry, it's Scottish. But it literally is, like, for me, I am not held restricted to anything in my life anymore. Albeit I do work very, very hard though, but yeah. I literally have that freedom to do anything. And I think on the other side of that, for me, it's like, I personally enjoy giving and helping people, and creating an impact. And I think that's a really hard question, and that's why I never really thought about it when you gave me it, because I was like, I'm not going to think about it, I'm going to see what comes to me when you ask me that question. So I think it's like, for me now, I understand what I maybe want in my life is that, like, element to be able to do what I want when I want, because like I'm over the toxic work environment. I'm over that, the toxic, I say toxic work hours. You go self-employed, and you literally work double the amount you've ever worked in your life. But that's what I want in my life. I think the meaning perhaps is like, maybe like giving back to others, helping others. Yeah, I think that's really hard.
Those are good. That's a good starting point, because you've got one sort of selfish internal driver, which you have to have, and you've got one selfless external driver, which is kind of what we should have anyway. So you're saying on the selfish one, and I use the word selfish, I think everybody should have selfish elements of what they do, 100%. So I'm not using it in a negative way whatsoever. But on the selfish one, for you personally, you don't want to be stuck in a 9-to-5 job that you only do for the security of the pay packet, and you hate it, you don't look forward to it, you dread it, and you, like, when you're there, you don't enjoy it, but the money's good and you get to meet cool people, so I'll do it anyway. And but it'll make me happy that I've got this handbag or whatever. Instead, selfishly, you want to have the freedom. You don't want an easy ride. You work longer hours now. You've got more stress now, so you're not making it easy for yourself. But you earn the right to have the freedom that if you want to sit and talk to me for a couple of hours on a Thursday morning, you can. If you want to go to Spain for the weekend, you can, because you're not answerable to anybody who's like, oh, make sure you're back at your desk by 12 o'clock, please, Robyn, or I'm going to have to give you another warning. Go fuck yourselves. Like, that's, some people might need that structure and those rules in their life, and there's nothing wrong with those people. I'm not those people. I'm sort of 90% unemployable. But you kind of, there's nothing wrong with wanting that the need for freedom, not in the William Wallace sense, but just in the sense that you can just chop and change. Like, you don't have to have a set strict routine. And then at the other end of that scale, the selfless end, like I genuinely believe, like, if every single person left their little bit of the world in a slightly better place than they found it, if they created a little bit more than they consumed, then the whole fucking thing would skyrocket, and everything would be better. The fact is, we've got too many selfish bastards who take more than they give, and they consume more than they create. And there's nothing wrong with that, but if too many people do that, we end up in a shitstorm. So I think your meaning of life values, I resonate with those massively. And it is essentially, it's an unanswerable question. There's no right or wrong answer. It just interests me to sort of see what makes people tick.
Yeah, definitely. I think definitely as I get older, that changes. It does. I think, as I say, like, it evolves all the time about kind of maybe what I value or what, like, I honestly, when I've been asked more like the question framed in terms of like, what do I want in life or what do I value from life, it isn't actually very much. Like, it's never like, oh, I want all these things. It's not, back to that, but it's more, it is really just that level of contentment, like having the freedom to choose, like not be held down, to be restricted by anything, and that to me, like, it's an absolute dream come true. Like, so for me personally, yeah, definitely.
And you just have to, if you don't have an employed job that gives you all of those things, you have to take a huge amount of risks. You have to make yourself very uncomfortable for a very long period of time to get good enough at something, to earn the right to earn enough from it to give you that freedom. And even then, when you do have it, when you're self-employed and you're running your own sort of business, fucking the rug can be pulled out from your feet at any minute and it can all be gone. Like, it's not difficult for someone to go bankrupt these days. Like, it can happen. So you've got so many other layers of added stress and things to worry about, but it sort of, that's part of the process. You kind of you take the rough with the smooth, don't you? You always know that's part of that could happen. So what can you do to mitigate it? And like, if it does happen, well, I've built something up before, how can I do it again? Like, how many people do you see that have had it all, lost it all, had it all again, lost it all again, had it on? It's sort of that, the process of trusting themselves to be able to replicate what they've done in a slightly different industry or slightly different product.
Yeah, that's so true. I think so many people look at people that are self-employed, like run businesses, and think, oh yeah, it must be so good to be, like, it must be so good.
Yeah.
And it is definitely one of the hardest things I have ever done, is run this now. Like, and I think that maybe, like, start of the year, it was more like the fear of it disappearing, like the fear of being like, oh, it's just too good to be true. Like, this is all going to end, Robyn. Like, you're not going to be doing this forever. Just get used to that. A lot of the more negative things, or not really negative. It's more trying to be like, or pretending to be more realistic.
Yeah.
But I don't think anybody ever never feels like that in terms of, oh, it could disappear tomorrow. Like, it literally could. Like, with the amount of money that I have spent on RDF, I've not put anything in a unsafe position, but I could literally walk away with like nothing if it doesn't work. Well, other than, you know, like a safety net. But like, I literally put my heart and soul into it. And I think that's I definitely was never that person last year. I was too scared to even buy, like, I don't know, like an online course that was 200 quid. Now I'm like that. I think you get to a point where you're like, you just have to do these things. But yeah, I think I really do wish sometimes people realised how challenging it is. The stress and the responsibility of having to turn up for yourself every single day when you have, our brains are very wired to protect ourselves and do the easy things all the time. And I think it's so easy to constantly have that voice in your head being like, oh, just have a day off today. Like, you know, you've worked so hard, rest. And you're like, I can't. Sometimes you do have to, like, sometimes you do have to, but you know, it's the hardest thing I've ever done. And I think I really would love more people looking inwards. Is that right? Yeah, like looking in, that it's actually the hardest thing like that I have ever done in my life. Like beyond like working ridiculous stupid hours and like fitness centers, like this is definitely, because it's your own, it's so hard. Like it's just, you know, right now launch a new site, it's like, oh, I could easily sit here for 12 hours on my laptop. I could easily just not go for what, like I could eat, you know, it's so easy just never to stop as well. Anyway, going off on a bit of a tangent, but
I think no, not at all. I think the scariest thing in all of that, and it touches on a point I made a little while ago as well, is you have to be ridiculously honest with yourself, and that if it goes tits up, it's probably your fault. And that for a lot of people is very, very difficult, because as I sort of said earlier, I'm guessing and I'm hypothesizing a little bit that I think people try to avoid looking inwards. That's why they have all of these like goals. They hang their hat on having stuff and doing stuff and keeping busy to subliminally avoid looking internally, because I think they're probably scared of what they might find in there. Whereas, so then if you translate that to business, you set up your own business. Well, whose fault is it? It's not Tom, Dick and Harry's fault, because you're fucking doing it your own way. You're doing it in your own time. You're doing what you want to do, and you've fucked it up. It's your fault. And unless you're brave enough to go, right, I fucked that up. The reason I fucked it up was this, this, and this. I need to change that. And now I'm going to go again. Go, right, now I fucked it up again, but not quite as bad. So maybe these changes were okay, but now I need to make these changes. And you find yourself forever having to be very, very honest and self-critical about
all the time
about what you did that needs to improve. And when you have the security of 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, like 28 holidays a year, here's your salary, like you're not going to be a millionaire, but you pay your bills, you've got 300 quid spare to go and spunk up the wall on whatever you like, happy days. Like it's a balance, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I was going to say something then, it's totally gone out of my head. Really annoying.
Was it more interesting than what I was saying?
Yeah, everything I've been saying is more interesting. Yeah.
Well, if it comes to you later, send me a voice note and I'll superimpose it. And we'll insert it later.
Yeah, I think it's more in that personal development side of things and being responsible for your own actions. I think at night, like a lot of people, again, goes into this industry, can come into this industry being like, oh yeah, it's all sunshine and rainbows, it's an easy way to make money, like, you know, it's all great. And actually, I think that, like, I suppose as well, when I had to come to terms with the fact that, like, I would not be able to enjoy the rewards of this business until probably a good 2 or 3 years later. Yes, at the beginning it was all very fast, quick, and it was fabulous. And, you know, I was like, hey, like, you know, what else do you do mid-pandemic with like extra money? But I think like a lot of people are so like, oh, well, I'll just do a little bit of graft and it'll be worth it. And I think I've read far too many self-development books. So I can definitely see, yeah, I was going somewhere and I'm not going to go there anymore. But yeah, absolutely.
The next question's a bit easier. Well, it might not be, but it's how do you want to be remembered? And associated,
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, associated to this question is one part of your homework, which is 70 characters of text that you would engrave on your headstone this afternoon.
So in terms of being remembered, I would like to be remembered as someone that has created an impact or an influence in someone's life, like one way or another. So whatever way that looks like, I just want to be able to make an impact on someone's life, you know. And I don't really think there's anything else to that. Like, I don't think there's anything to be remembered by specifically, like, oh, Robyn did that one thing, but more about the impact that I had on someone's life when they met me, you know, like, on how did I make them feel? What did they, you know, what were they able to change in their life for a long time? Because that's what, you know, Robyn helped me do. So yeah, I think that's definitely how I'd like to be remembered, for sure.
So again, there, your sort of your aim is that you've left someone else's life in a better place than it was before they met you or came across you. And if that happens to one person, great. 2, 10, 20, 100, like the more the merrier. But you want to be giving them something rather than just taking.
Definitely, 100%. It would be about, you know, how, whenever, whoever, and whenever that was, like, what impact did I have on their life? Like, how, you know, how did I influence them? Or, you know, that's 100%. It would be about what I was able to change within them, rather than being like, you know, like, what did I do? Like, and I think that goes back to, like, it's never about us. I think PTs and instructors are really good at that. It's thinking it's about them. It's actually not. It's about your clients. Like, it's never about you. 100%. There's a couple of things that I've done in terms of, like, you know, awards and stuff to be recognised for things that I've done. But in terms of, like, this journey, it's about my members. It's about the clients. The reason I spend X amount of money to develop this website is never for me. Like, this is about them. So I think that, like, I want to be the person, especially an instructor, that doesn't buy into the bullshit industry of having to market something, to sell something, to, like, give false information. Like, so, like, I think, you know, I see a lot of instructors with, like, 8-week transformation challenges. And I'm like, okay, great, but you're marketing that so you make more money. Like, I have a thing about some of these things, and I'm like, but you're doing that for you. You're not doing that for your clients, because if you did, you wouldn't be doing 8-week transformations. Like, because you're ultimately trying to get, you're aggressively implying results, actions on them that is not going to give them the results that they need long term. So, you know, I want to be, I suppose, yeah, like, the bigger thing that I'd love to be remembered for is being the voice of women, I suppose, that stood up for the shit in the industry. Like, because I think often women are really silenced. Have I just gone deaf? Can you hear me?
No, I can still hear you. Yeah, I think it's just changed slightly. The headphones disconnected or something.
Yeah, it's only one of them.
Oh yeah, no, there you go. Yeah, back to normal now.
Okay, fab. I can only hear you in one, so that's fine. But yeah, ultimately to be remembered for the impact I created to someone's life personally, but also, you know, I think women are often silenced. We're often told, like, you can't be too much, you can't say certain things. Like, people have got this fear of being cancelled. We live in such a cancel culture now. And I think that, like, it is time that things are called out, because they're not good for people's lives. They're not good for, you know, any of these methods and stuff. So yeah, I think that I want to be the person that's bringing real, honest advice to change people's lives in the right way, which is not the sexy one, unfortunately, because no one wants to really learn the truth. But yeah, that's probably how I'd like to be remembered. I wrote down my tombstone. I wrote my headstone thing down. Do you want me to read it out?
Yeah, if you could, please.
Yeah, I would. So I made this, I've not actually listened to anybody else's, but I made this about other people again, which is funny. So, but I don't know if I really would do this. But hypothetically, I wrote, right, ready for this?
Yeah, I'm ready.
If you can read this, in case nobody told you today, you are amazing. Your body is not defined by a number, and your worth is not defined by how much body fat you have. You are more than what you think you look like.
Don't try and fit in to make others happy. Be loud, be chaotic, and be the brightest in the room always. That was my headstone.
But and it's so I think this is only the 6th or 7th time I've done this, but it's interesting the amount of times people have, I think pretty much every time the words someone has read out that they've said they want to have on their headstone has been about it's been about avoiding the typical like here Mark was a builder and he loved his family and blah blah blah. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it was more just sort of like here's a summary of Mark, whereas every single person has come across with sort of like a way of approaching it. Where if someone's walking through a graveyard and they see this, I want them to take something from it that makes them, it puts a rocket up their arse, it like lights a fire in their belly, and it makes them fucking ask questions, or it makes them think about things that makes them tweak or change their behavior and their actions that create something rather than just here's a summary of Mark's life, if that makes sense. And yours is no different. And it's interesting, like I wonder how many times do people get asked what do you want on your headstone? Like I don't know, probably not very often. So how many people die and then have a headstone put above them that might not be what they wanted it to say? Like
yeah, that's true.
Why don't we talk about these things, like, which is why I talk about it to a very small audience, but it might grow one day. But sort of what then happens, and it's happened on a couple of occasions where people have written their text they wanted on the headstone, and they've answered the question, how do you want to be remembered? And then they've realized that the things that they're doing every day might not be giving them a direct route to how they want to be remembered. So they've changed stuff. They've done more of things, or they've done less of things, and it's impacted their life so that they're working towards how they want to be remembered, not away from it. And like it just all fucking fascinates me. Like they're very awkward questions that you don't hear people ask or answer very often, but by doing so hopefully it makes other people sit and go, fuck it, it doesn't matter that I don't know the answers to these things, but if I think about it, it might help me change a few bits and pieces.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like then your intentions change, and that the way that you
then action things for like the next stage of your life.
What and how, in terms of like how you want to be remembered.
It was funny because I said to you right before I read it out in terms of like, don't know if I'd actually do it, but now when I think about it,
when you then asked me how do I want to be remembered, was literally then what I actually said in that headstone, which I didn't actually pay attention to, was like I when you asked me that question, I literally had this image in my head of like, this obviously the person that is there is going to be not in a good frame of mind anyway. And I just was like, how many women walk around feeling shit in themselves all the time? Like a massive percentage. And I just was like, you know what? In a miserable place, in a sad place, whilst feeling like shit, I was like, if I could just be that person's reminder on that day that like your worth is not defined by these things, then at least they walk away and think, oh, actually, that maybe made me feel a bit better. So, yeah. And I literally had this scenario, like this woman walking, like, around the graveyard. But yeah.
Well, graveyards are sad places, aren't they? They're depressing places. You don't go to a graveyard and have a party, and like maybe some people do, but you don't go and celebrate and like be happy that you're there, because the only reason you're there is probably to visit someone who was worth enough to you that you want to go and pay your respects. So you're going to be sad and upset. And then how many times do you just need to read like was born here, died here, like was a brother, a husband, a father, blah 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 blah. Okay, that's nice, but it doesn't fucking make my life change. Like, what if we had headstones that people read and they go, fuck me, I'm gonna take a picture of that and I'm gonna pin it on my bathroom mirror, and every day when I'm brushing my teeth, I'm gonna look at it and I'm gonna take a bit of fucking value from that poor dead bastard who now cannot change a fucking thing, but they're changing me and the way I act and behave, and I'm going to pass that on to other people.
Yeah, I think I'm going to do this now, so people can never get rid of me ever. Like, I'll still be inspiring everybody when I'm dead.
Yeah, John Clark brought up a quote. I think he said Winston Churchill quote. Like, I don't know if it was Churchill, but he said there's every person dies twice. So the first time you die is when you die, when your heart stops beating, and the second time you die is the last time your name is ever mentioned, like after you've gone. And what about for so many people when they die twice in quick succession? Bang bang, you're fucking gone.
Yeah.
What if you can extend that? And what if in tens, dozens, or hundreds, thousands of years, there's still a meme going round on TikTok of your headstone that's made an impact?
Absolutely, that's something that I think I'm going to strive to do.
Do it.
Yeah.
Robyn, I've got one more question and then it's letter time. What do you regret? What regrets do you have?
Okay, I love this question, but I feel a bit cliche saying that, like, I don't actually think I regret anything in my life to this point, but I think there's things that I could regret, and I think there's things that, like, both past and present, and I'll explain what I mean. So, like, there's things that, for example, like, I missed a family member's birthday because I was on a diet, right?
Yeah.
And I remember it happening, and often afterwards I'd be like, oh, I really regretted that. And I don't think it's a true regret. I just think that a lot of the things that I could regret in my past, I have reframed in a way that actually served to be a purpose in life, like, that actually served a very valuable lesson. So, you know, the things that, like, I did maybe when I was younger, like, I gave up sport because I was too interested in smoking fags and, like, drinking in the woods. Like, do I regret that? Or am I actually just grateful that I went through that period of being an absolute rad child to then come out the other end and not be? Like, you know, I think that they are lessons to me rather than situations in my life being like, oh, well, I regret that, and then never took any meaning from it. So I think that was probably how I perceive the scenarios rather than it being regrets. And then I think the way that I'm currently working, albeit temporarily, I'm aware that if I continue to do that, it would be something I would regret in the future. So that made me think as well. So I think, like, because I started reading a book, something about something about 5 wishes of dying, something like that. And you can, like, dive into this stuff if you're okay about death. But I think, like, some of the things that you hear people often say is spending more time with family, spending less time working. And I think, like, right now, I think it's really hard because I've had to make serious sacrifices in order to build something to where I need it to be at a certain time, that has meant that I've had less family time, less time with my partner, having to miss, you know, events. But almost like I know that that will be worth it, but if I keep doing that for the rest of my life, then I'll regret that. So I know that kind of, like, I need to understand that that's okay now, but I can't keep doing that. So ultimately none. It just made me reflect a little bit different way. Like, you know, I don't regret any situation. You know, there's things I've done that I'm like, fuck me, Robyn, like, how are you still alive? I definitely don't regret them. Absolutely not. Like, you know, I would never do anything now, but
I think that's probably the perfect answer, and it's very, very similar to what my answer would be, is that it's impossible to have never done something that, looking back on, you go, well, probably shouldn't have done that. Like, it's in
died then.
Yeah, exactly. It's impossible. So of course there are things that we regret, or that if we could wind back the clock and do them differently, we would. But the difference is, if your future is then constantly dictated by something you regret from the past, then you're stitching yourself up twice, and you're holding yourself back. So it's kind of, for me, it's getting that balance of, I'm aware that these incidents were definitely not optimal. Like, I really shouldn't have done them. However, what have I learned from them, and how is it changing and impacting me moving forwards?
Yeah.
So that, moving on to the other part of your point, I can avoid things in the future. I can predict regrets coming, and because I'm aware of them, I can again change my behavior to reduce their impact so that I don't regret them in years to come. And that's got to be the sweet spot, surely.
Absolutely, definitely, definitely. I don't regret anything. I honestly had a crazy time up until I was like, okay, probably should stop doing, like, being absolutely mental. So yeah, those things definitely made me the person that I am today. So I'm thankful for them.
Cool.
I probably wouldn't change them. I probably wouldn't. You know, I'm glad that I did all the stuff I did.
No drama at all. It's letter time. I don't know anything about your letter other than you were teasing me last night with your approach or your idea for the letter. So I'm intrigued.
So it's not really super long. I hope that's okay.
Doesn't matter, no.
My letter is to my 17-year-old self.
Okay. So and that's what, 10 years ago?
10 years ago, yeah, it's absolutely crazy. But yeah, do I just read out?
Yeah, go for it.
I literally did it like a proper letter, like, "Hey Robyn, it's me." I actually really enjoyed this. It was quite, like, it's nice. Anyway, okay, let me go. "Hey Robyn, it's me, the future you. Whilst I'm sitting at my desk on a Monday night working far too much to create something so wonderful to help so many that you helped me create. And I just wanted to thank you for working as hard as you did to make my current life the way that it is now. Without this effort, I wouldn't be here today. For every day you went above and beyond for every single person you ever met so that they would have the best experience has proven to be entirely worth it. You really did make more of an impact to others when you were younger, and I'm sorry that no one told you that at the time. But I just wanted to also remind you to stop caring so much about what others think of you. Their opinion will eventually mean nothing. I didn't believe when people said that either, but it will literally mean nothing. Stop trying to fit in with others. You aren't too loud and you aren't too much. Guess what? The world will love you. Guess what? The world will love you just as you are. Surprising, right? With a little question mark. And I can promise you that. So please don't try and change yourself because you think that others will like you more. In fact, showing up as you is far more important. And P.S. you aren't fat. If you think you are now at 17, wait till you're 27. In brackets, that's a joke. Kind regards, your future you. And that was half a joke, by the way, but when people always say, like, God, when I was 17, I thought this. Anyway.
Well, I like the way that you were so polite to yourself. Kind regards, Robyn.
Kind regards from me.
Yeah. I love hearing these. I love hearing these letters, and I don't know why they're all so different and they're all so valuable. And in hindsight, hearing you say that, and I can sort of like, I don't know, my eyes were welling up a little bit, just sort of hearing you tell your old self that probably wouldn't have believed any of this bollocks had you had the ability to tell her, because she was so adamant that she was too loud, she was too fat, she was right to be so anxious, and she did have to try and fit all of these other things to please other people. Like, she would have been so sure that she was right that she wouldn't have even entertained this information if it was possible to go back and give her it. But as sliding doors moments, like, is it the fact that she had to figure that out for herself that gives
Yeah.
you the amount of confidence that you have now? Because had that letter landed on her lap on her 17th birthday and she read it and was like, oh, brilliant, this is interesting, that's changed everything, would you be where you are now? Like, there's no way of knowing, but it's sort of, it fascinates me to hear, like, the interesting thing for me is how many other 17-year-old girls need to fucking be shaken by the collar and to read that, not because it's going to click the fingers and transform their lives, but just so that it maybe takes away some of the doubt and the pain and the anxiety, the nervousness, and it sort of maybe just adds a little bit of a conflicting information to them other than what they think they have to behave like for everyone else's benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly it. And I think it was just funny. I think that, like, when people would say to me, like, oh, when you're older, you'll stop giving a shit what people think. And I was like, that will never happen to me. Like, that will never happen. And I literally don't give a shit anymore. It's the weirdest thing. It really is. And I think as well, like, what I loved about when I wrote that, I think that when I worked in my previous roles, like, not that we turn up to work to be congratulated, we're there to be paid ultimately. And obviously, if you're PT or certain industries, you're there to help people, but you know what I mean? We're not there to be like, oh, well done, well done, well done. But I think that, like, had somebody maybe just said to me, like, oh, you're doing a really great job, I may have then be a little bit more confident in my ability to do the job. Like, because I genuinely believe, no, like, I genuinely thought that I was, like, so average. Like, I would look at other PTs and be like, oh my god, like, they have the dream, like, they're doing so well, like, I'll never be like that, I can't be like that, like, oh god, I don't know enough, and who do I think I am? And I think, like, I was really proud of myself, and this is where it's paid off now, which I wish more people realise, is that I never knew at the time the impact that it would create by going above and beyond for clients and members and people that you come in contact with. Because the more people that I did that with, now when it comes to the online world, these people are my cheerleaders. Like, I may have only met them once or twice, but they're the ones that are on my, like, on the comments, like, you know, they're the ones that are messaging me. Half of them are my members, because at some point in my life, I made them feel really, really good. And I remember being the only instructor that ever wanted to do gym inductions, and nobody else ever wanted to do them because they thought they were a waste of time, and they're like, oh God, I've got a gym induction. I'm like, no, you have an opportunity to help somebody feel confident in a gym and safely. Like, and I was always really proud of that, and I was always really proud of the way I made people feel. But at the time, nobody ever really said, like, that was a really good job that you done, or, you know, going above and beyond. Not that we all have to do that, but reflecting back on it now, if I could help more PTs understand that you will never realise at that moment in time why that's important beyond that individual situation, because in years to come, I then had this reputation that I didn't even know that I had. Like, that when I jumped online, and all these people that had ever come in contact with me and all the gyms that I'd ever worked in been like, oh, you know, like, all these positive words. And I think that, you know, I'm very proud of that. And I don't think that at the time I was, you know, told, like, you know, that's really good, or I didn't understand that in years to come it would serve me greater benefit. And I think if more people understood that, then in years to come, like, you'll never know. You never truly know. I never knew that I was going to do this. But I, you know, have had, like, all these little cheerleaders on the side and, like, you know, Team Robyn. And I'm like, wow, all because I made them feel really good at some point in their journey and my journey. So I think that was a really big thing for me, that when I was writing that, made me think, yeah.
And on that note, things like that are the least sexy, least technical, they're the least difficult things to do, but they're so overlooked. Just like that, it's nice to be nice, to go above and beyond for people, to want to help someone else for no reason other than for them to feel confident and competent in the gym, so they're not going to hurt themselves, because at some point you benefited from that and you pass it on to somebody else, and that's not going to make you 10 grand a month, like no chance, but it plants the seed and it lays the foundation that over years and years and years kind of develops a person who has constantly gone above and beyond, treated everybody else how they wanted to be treated, has helped people just for the love of helping them, not for any other reason. And the reward for doing that persistently and consistently and effectively is that you can earn a living out of it, because you can learn a living out of anything now, especially in the online world, and you can make a good one. And none of that, when it comes, we're crossing paths here with a few things you've talked about, whether it's the headstone, the meaning of life, and like the things that you regret, like it's all sort of coming together in my head, at least, in that if you're doing those things for the right reason, and that reason is there's an element of selfishness to protect yourself and to look after your essential needs, but there's also a hell of a lot of selflessness, wanting to pass it on to other people so they don't have to suffer the insecurity and the anxiety and whatever other conditions or moods or kind of phases, emotional phases that you've been through. You want to take that pain away from a few other people, and you don't do that by walking around with a sign up saying, give me your money, give me your money, give me your money, I'm fucking brilliant, I'll give you a six-pack, what do you want, 10-day abs, I'll give you 9-day abs. Like you don't get that. You can convince some people to give you some money for some period of time, but you can't persuade a lot of people to give you a lot of money over a long period of time, unless you've got those really key values and principles in place, which it sounds, whether it was deliberate or not, you absolutely have got. And good things happen to good people, and therefore, like, you are where you are right now, and I'm very pleased that it's happened.
Thank you. I suppose that answers the who is Robyn Drummond question now, I suppose.
Who is Robyn Drummond?
Absolutely. What is it that you first said to me when we did that other podcast? I think you definitely called me a peasant.
I called you a peasant?
I'm definitely sure you called me a peasant.
If I did, it would have been affectionate, and it would have only been as from one fellow peasant to another. Like,
of course,
it wouldn't be me thinking I'm in some sort of ivory tower pissing on everyone else who's further down, because I genuinely that's not the case. But yeah, well, you were at the very bottom and you've made it up towards the very top. Does that define you? Does it fuck? Has it ticked every single box that you now feel like you achieved everything? Has it fuck? But more importantly, underneath all of that, you've still got your same modest, generous, selfless values that just happened to have built a business that makes a fair whack of money.
Absolutely, definitely. I'm really proud of those values for sure.
Proud?
I get paid. Yeah, it's yeah, definitely proud that that. Like, I live by those values for sure. Definitely will always be humble for sure. Yeah, and as I say, it's just a bonus that I get to do that and I get paid for it. So the dream come true.
Exactly, perfect. And what a way to end. Genuinely, thank you very, very much for your time. We've gone over 2 hours again. I'm struggling to do these.
So crazy.
I'm struggling to do them short, but it doesn't matter, because like the only reason this podcast exists is for my entertainment, and if other people happen to listen, then like that's a bonus. But yeah, we've gone over 2 hours and I definitely need a pee. I appreciate your time a hell of a lot. I hope you get that website finished. And then if anyone wants to come and find you, what's the website going to be? RobynDrummondFitness.com?
Yeah, and Robyn Drummond Fitness on every social media platform, every single one.
I'll tag you when I post this over the weekend. And I appreciate your time, as I've said a couple of times before. And well done. Keep going. And I will speak to you sometime soon, I'm sure.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really, really.
You are welcome. Thank fuck it's Monday. See you, Robyn.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed my chat with Robyn. If you know someone, or you can think of someone who would benefit from hearing about her story of overcoming anxiety and lack of confidence to building a huge business community that makes a lot of money and does a lot of great things, then please do share this show or tag someone in one of the social media posts so that they can have a listen. I might say that I'm not bothered about people listening, but I don't mean it. So share the wealth and drag a few other people in. Thank you very much. As always, a huge shout out to Graham from @Graphics for Coaches. He's got a shit ton of free information that you can go and use to make your business look a bit sexier. And if you slip him a few quid, he will even do it for you. Anyway, thank you very much. I'll see you next time.